The sun hung low and merciless over the New Mexico territory in the late summer of 1879, turning the scrubland into a shimmering sea of dust and heat. Owen Booker rode the fence line slowly, his horse picking its way through mesquite and rock with the careful step of an animal that knew exhaustion as well as its rider did. At 34, Owen carried the weight of 5 hard years since fever had taken Clara in the spring of 1874. She had lingered only 4 days, her breath growing shallower until it stopped altogether, leaving him with a quiet house, a half-finished quilt on the bed, and a silence that had settled into his bones like dust into timber. The ranch, 300 acres of marginal graze, bordered by arroyos and low hills, still ran, but barely. Cattle grew lean, hands came and went, and Owen spoke less with each passing season. He mended what broke, branded what wandered, and returned each evening to a kitchen where the stove stayed cold unless he forced it to life. That afternoon he spotted her from the ridge. A small figure in a faded calico dress stood beside the main road where it bent toward his gate, one hand clutching the handle of a blackened cast-iron pot, the other shielding her eyes from the glare. She did not wave or call out. She simply waited, as though she had been waiting a long time already. Owen reined in, studying her. She looked no more than 20, thin to the point of fragility, her dark hair tied back in a loose knot that had come half undone. Dust coated her hem and boots. A small canvas satchel rested at her feet. He urged the horse forward until he was close enough to see the faint tremble in her shoulders. Not from fear, he thought, but from the kind of tired that goes marrow deep. "You lost?" he asked, voice rough from disuse. She shook her head once. Her eyes, gray-green and steady, met his without flinching. "No, mister. I come looking for work." Owen glanced at the empty horizon behind her, then back. "Ain't much call for women out here. Hands are all men, and they don't stay long. I don't aim to ride herd," she said quietly. "I don't talk much, mister. But I can cook." The words landed plain between them, no plea or ornament. Owen felt something shift inside his chest, small and unexpected, like a door creaking on rusted hinges. He had eaten his own burned beans and tough jerky for years. The thought of a real meal, something seasoned, something warm, caught him off guard. Still, he hesitated. Strays brought trouble as often as they brought help. Yet she stood there holding that pot like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth, and something in her stillness reminded him of Clara in the last months, resolute, even when the strength was gone. He swung down from the saddle. "What's your name?" "Ellie Mae. Folks?" "None left." He nodded, accepting the answer as it was given. No story spilled out. She offered none, and he asked for none. After a long moment he said, "You can try the kitchen one night. If it ain't fit to eat, you move on come morning. If it is," he let the sentence hang. She gave a single nod. "Fair enough." He tied her satchel behind the saddle and offered a hand up. She took it without hesitation, though her grip was light, almost careful, as if testing whether he would pull away. They rode the remaining half-mile in silence. The ranch house appeared over the rise-low adobe walls, bleached pale, a sagging porch, a windmill creaking lazily in the dry breeze. Smoke had not risen from the chimney in years, except when Owen bothered to boil coffee. The place looked abandoned from a distance, though it was not. It was merely waiting. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and stale hearth. Ellie paused in the doorway, eyes traveling over the sparse room. A scarred oak table, 2 mismatched chairs, a cold iron stove, shelves half empty of crockery. A narrow hall led to bedrooms. One door stood ajar, revealing a made bed with a faded quilt folded at the foot. She did not ask about it. Instead, she walked straight to the kitchen corner, set her pot on the workbench, and began rolling up her sleeves. Owen watched from the doorway a moment, then turned away. He unsaddled the horse, checked the water trough, fed the chickens that scratched in the yard. When he returned, the stove was lit. Flames licked the iron, and Ellie moved with quiet purpose, chopping an onion she had found in the root cellar, cracking eggs from the basket on the sill, reaching for a small cloth bundle she had carried in her satchel. Dried thyme. A pinch of salt she measured with her fingers. By dusk she set 2 plates on the table. Scrambled eggs flecked with herb, thick slices of yesterday's bread toasted crisp, a tin cup of weak coffee. Owen sat. She sat across from him. Neither spoke. He took the first bite and closed his eyes for a second, longer than necessary. The eggs were soft, seasoned just enough to taste like memory. He ate slowly, methodically. When the plate was clean, he looked at her. "You're hired," he said. She nodded once, as though it were already decided. He cleared his throat. "There's a room down the hall. Used to be. Well, it's empty now. Sheets are in the chest. Water in the pitcher. Thank you, Mr. Owen," he corrected. "Ain't no mister here." "Ellie," she answered, though he already knew. That night she slept in the room that had once belonged to Clara. The quilt still carried faint traces of lavender from years ago. A hairbrush rested on the dresser beside a daguerreotype of a woman smiling beside a small boy who had not lived past 3. Ellie did not touch them. She simply lay down, listened to the wind move through the eaves, and let exhaustion take her. Morning came early. Owen found coffee already brewed when he stepped into the kitchen. Ellie stood at the stove frying salt pork, potatoes sizzling in the pan. She had swept the floor, wiped down the shelves, arranged the few jars of preserves she had discovered in the pantry. The house smelled alive for the first time in half a decade. They fell into a rhythm without discussion. She cooked. He ate. He worked the cattle and fences. She tended the garden patch behind the house that had gone to weed. She planted what seeds she could find, carrots, beans, a few hills of squash, and watered them from the bucket each evening. Owen watched from the porch sometimes, saying nothing. Once he carried a load of split wood to the back door without being asked. She murmured thanks. He nodded and left. Weeks passed. The meals grew steadier, more varied. Chicken stew thickened with flour, cornbread baked golden in the Dutch oven, apple dumplings when she traded eggs with a passing peddler for dried fruit. Owen began repairing things he had long ignored, the wobbly dining table, the loose shutter on the front window. He left small offerings on the workbench, a bundle of wild sage, a new paring knife he had sharpened himself. She accepted them without comment, yet he noticed how she used each one. One evening after supper she cleared the plates and returned with a small plate of biscuits flaky, warm, brushed with butter. She set it before him without a word. He broke one open, steam rising, and took a bite. It tasted like home he had forgotten existed. "Where'd you learn to bake like that?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. "My ma," she said softly. "She ran a bakery till she couldn't anymore. Taught me when I was little. Said the secret was never to rush the dough or the people eating it." Owen looked at her then, really looked. Her hands were small but strong, scarred faintly from years of hot pans and sharp knives. Her eyes held stories she did not tell. He felt the old grief stir, but it was gentler now, less like a blade. "You don't have to stay," he said suddenly. "If there's somewhere better—" "There isn't," she interrupted, voice steady. "Not for me," he nodded slowly. "Then you're home." The words hung between them, simple and final. She gave the smallest of smiles, barely there, yet it reached her eyes. Outside, the windmill turned in the night breeze, creaking like an old promise finally kept. The first snow of the season came early that year, dusting the New Mexico hills with a thin white veil that melted by noon. Owen woke before dawn as always, the cold seeping through the adobe walls, and found the kitchen already warm. Ellie had the stove going, a low fire crackling, and the smell of rising dough filled the room. She stood at the floured board, sleeves pushed to her elbows, kneading with steady, practiced motions. Her hair was pinned loosely, a few strands escaping to frame her face in the lamplight. She did not look up when he entered, but she said good morning in that quiet way of hers. Owen poured coffee from the pot she had set on the back burner strong, black, just how he liked it now that she had learned his preference without ever asking. He sat at the table and watched her work. The rhythm of her hands was soothing, almost hypnotic. In the months she had arrived, the house had changed in small, accumulating ways. Curtains she had sewn from old feed sacks hung at the windows, catching the pale morning light. Jars of pickled okra and spiced peaches lined the pantry shelves. The floors no longer creaked quite so mournfully underfoot, because she had learned where to oil the boards. The ranch itself felt steadier too. Fewer cattle strayed, the fences held. Even the hands who rode through for short stints seemed less restless. He sipped his coffee and said, "Snow's light." "Won't last," she nodded, shaping the dough into loaves. "Good. Means the roads stay open. Peddlers do soon." "I need flour and sugar." Owen grunted agreement. The peddler, a wiry man named Harlan, who drove a creaking wagon pulled by two mismatched mules, came every 6 weeks or so, bringing news along with calico, nails, and whatever else the territory could not grow or make. Owen usually bartered hides or a few head of cattle. Ellie had begun trading eggs, butter she churned herself, and the occasional jar of preserves. After breakfast, fresh bread, still warm, butter, and eggs fried crisp at the edges, Owen rode out to check the north pasture. The snow had already vanished except in the shadow draws. He found 3 yearlings tangled in barbed wire, cuts shallow but bloody. He cut them free, doctored the worst of the wounds with pine tar, and drove them back to the main herd. By the time he returned, the sun was high, and Ellie was in the garden, kneeling between rows of winter kale she had planted in late fall. She wore an old coat of his, sleeves rolled many times, and a scarf tied over her hair. She did not hear him approach until his shadow fell across the dirt. She looked up, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Almost done. Just pulling the last of the carrots before the ground freezes hard." He crouched beside her, took the small trowel from her hand without asking, and began loosening the soil around a stubborn root. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the scrape of metal on earth and the occasional rustle of dry leaves. When the basket was full, she sat back on her heels and wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly. Owen paused, trowel halfway to the ground. "Leaving here?" She nodded, eyes on the carrots instead of him. "This place, after everything." He considered the question. The ranch had been Clara's dream, once land of their own, a family to fill it. After she and the boy were gone, it had become duty, then habit, then something close to penance. He had never seriously considered walking away. Where would he go? What would he do with himself if not this? "No," he said finally. "Not anymore." She looked at him then, searching. "Because of the land." "Because of the life," he answered. "It's mine." Was hers too. Feels wrong to just abandon it. Ellie was quiet a long moment. Then she said, "I ran once." He waited. "Ma died slow," she continued, voice low. "Consumption. I nursed her 3 years. When she went, stepfather sold the bakery, took the money, left me with nothing but debts and a train ticket he thought would get me out of his sight. I used the ticket, ended up in Santa Fe working kitchens till I couldn't stand the smell of grease anymore. Kept moving. Always thought the next place would feel different. Did it? No." She brushed dirt from her hands. "Till here." Owen felt the words settle between them like snow. He stood, offered her a hand up. She took it, her fingers cool against his calloused palm. They walked back to the house together. That evening Harlan's wagon rattled into the yard just as the light turned gold. The mule stamped, breath steaming. Harlan climbed down, tipped his hat to Ellie, and began unloading crates. Owen helped carry the heavier sacks while, "You're the cook folks are talking about in town," he said. "Word's getting around. Preacher's wife asked if you teach the ladies Sunday baking. Said your cornbread alone could save souls." Ellie smiled faintly. "I don't teach. Just cook," Harlan chuckled. Owen paid for the supplies with a stack of hides and 2 sides of bacon Ellie had cured. Before Harlan left, he pulled a small wrapped parcel from under the seat and handed it to Ellie. "Thought you might like this," he said. "Found it in Albuquerque." Bookseller was closing out. Ellie unwrapped it carefully. Inside were 2 slim volumes, one a collection of recipes from New England kitchens, the other a worn copy of Little Women. Her fingers traced the covers. Harlan touched his hat again and climbed back onto the wagon. As the mules pulled away, Ellie stood watching until the dust settled. Later, after supper beef stew rich with onions and carrots they had pulled that day, Ellie joined him, wrapped in a shawl, one of the new books open in her lap. The night was clear, stars sharp against black sky. A coyote called somewhere distant. She read aloud softly, voice steady. "Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents." Owen listened, letting the words wash over him. He had never been one for stories, but there was something in her reading, the quiet cadence, the way she gave life to the characters. When she reached the end of the chapter, she closed the book and looked at the stars. "Think they were happy?" she asked. "Who?" "The March girls." In the end, he thought about it. Reckoned they were. Had each other. "That counts," she nodded slowly. "Family doesn't always mean blood." The words hung there. Owen felt them settle deep, stirring something he had long buried. He looked at her profile in the moonlight. She had come to him thin and silent and carrying nothing but a pot and a lifetime of quiet hurt. Now she filled the house with warmth, with scent, with small acts of care he had forgotten were possible. "Ellie," he said, voice rougher than he intended. She turned to him. "I ain't good with words," he began. "Never was, but you brought something back I thought was gone for good. I don't know what the future holds," he continued. "Ranch might fail, weather might turn, but if you'll stay, I'd like to build whatever comes next together." Her breath caught, just barely. She looked down at the book in her lap, fingers tightening on the cover. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright. Owen reached across the space between them and took her hand. Her fingers curled around his, small but sure. Winter deepened. Snow came again, heavier this time, blanketing the hills and silencing the world. Owen and Ellie worked side by side. On Christmas Eve, she set a small pine branch on the table, decorated with bits of ribbon from her sewing basket and a few paper stars she had cut from an old catalog. They ate roast chicken, potatoes mashed with butter, and pie made from the last of the dried apples. Afterward she read to him from Little Women by the fire, and when she finished the chapter about the Christmas play, he leaned over and kissed her. She kissed him back. Spring followed winter, as it always does. The snow melted, the arroyos ran full, grass pushed green through the earth. The garden bloomed, calves dropped. The ranch began to thrive in ways it had not in years. Owen and Ellie married quietly in the spring, with only the preacher and Harlan as witnesses. She wore the blue gingham dress she had made herself. He wore his best shirt, freshly ironed. Years passed. Children came, 2 girls and a boy, all with Ellie's gray-green eyes and Owen's quiet ways. The house filled with laughter, small feet running across floors. Ellie kept swept clean, the smell of bread always rising. The ranch grew. They added acres when neighbors sold out, built a new barn, hired hands who stayed year-round. On quiet evenings, Owen still sat on the porch with coffee, Ellie beside him with a book or mending. Sometimes she read aloud. Sometimes they simply watched the sunset. One evening years later, as their oldest daughter practiced her letters at the kitchen table, Ellie set a plate of biscuits before Owen. "Tastes like home," he said. She smiled, the same small smile she had given him that first night years ago. "It is home," she answered. And it was.